Somehow I feel the depth of feeling, sense the depth of feeling in both the Psalm and 1 Peter 2 as Paul reads to us. And I'll have to say I discovered a sweetness in the letter from 1 Peter, that came from reading the whole letter. And as I read that letter, I saw a picture of a community under pressure, a community without resources, and a community that Peter then lifts up and builds up and encourages with words of chosenness and value. And so I went through Eugene Peterson's words. That's the translator, the paraphraser of that passage. And like a beachcomber, I found the words that stood out to me and pieced them together as a kind of small poem. And here are those words. Chosen, 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 nothing to something. Welcome in the place of honor, vibrant. A taste at the breast of God. Drink deep. I hope I'm intriguing you with themes that might capture your heart and mind from this remarkable passage. Chosen, chosen, chosen. Nothing to something. Welcome in the place of honor, vibrant. A taste at the breast of God. Drink deep. My question this morning is, what does it mean today to be a living stone? To capture Peter's image, not just to be strong, but to be something more, a different kind of strength perhaps, a source of life, a bridge from a life-giving God to this world. Peter calls Jesus the original stone. This makes sense. It was Jesus who nicknamed him Peter, the rock. And he's saying this is the original stone, the stone alive for all, the cornerstone. His cut, Jesus' cut, his shape has given the building its strong lines of service and held it true. Without him, the building would be insecure, uneven, uninhabitable. So this caused me to back up into the Gospels and wonder, what kind of strength do we see in this living stone? What does Jesus show us? And it seems to me that strength lies in the way in which he read the ancient Jewish Torah. Jesus got up in the temple and found a text at the end of the book of Isaiah. He read the text aloud as a way of giving meaning to his call. It gives us an interpretation of how Jesus saw life and ministry. He read there, "The Spirit of God is upon me, giving power to heal and release and forgive." Now, other reformers of Jesus' day also read the Torah, but they read it differently. They emphasized adherence, often strict adherence to the Jewish law. But Jesus seemed to see something else, that the ark of God, if you will, the presence of God in the world, was to release and to redeem and to restore. That's the meaning of the Torah for Jesus. He believed that God was in the world to love the creation, to love all of its inhabitants. And Jesus was a living stone because he gave a life-giving vision in the scriptures that he read and taught. His vision was not about permanence, structure, and control. His vision was about stability and restoration. Now, as I said, Simon Peter was chosen and renamed by Jesus Peter the Rock. Peter, in spite of that name, was often quite insecure. He was indeed the master of the great belly flop. Someone who, like it or not, failed in big ways. blustery, impulsive, a big character with a big heart. Peter said things that he later regretted, did things that made him blush, found himself on the wrong side of issues often enough. But Peter was not just a flop. He had trouble being what I'd call right-sized. Right-sized. Inflated on the one hand, deflated and discouraged on the other, his floppiness was about having trouble with knowing himself and the love of God in his life. And yet, there was a bridge of life between Jesus, his friend, and Peter the flop. Not only did Jesus love him there, but he found in Peter a bridge-building partner. For instance, one day Peter fell into deep sleep and had a powerful, provocative dream. In the dream, he saw all of creation laid out, all the animals, and God's voice saying to him, "Rise, Peter, and feast on all of creation without distinction." In other words, the dream seemed to be saying, don't be constrained by Jewish laws of who's in and who's out, what's clean and what's unclean. The dream was repeated, and a very troubled Peter woke up, heard knocking on his front door, and went down to greet strangers at his door. There he found a group asking him to come to a Gentile home and explain his message. And here is where Peter became a living stone. He felt the urging to say yes. And almost unwittingly, Peter became a bridge for God's life to someone he would otherwise never have met or shared a meal with. Peter, at that moment, was a living stone, building a living bridge to a new place in God's creation. Well, here is how life comes to me in this passage. Jesus surrounded Peter and his mistakes, never gave up on him. And in that new life, he invited Peter to also create new opportunities. And so when Peter says to this church, chosen, 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 he's really describing his own life as chosen in spite, chosen along with, chosen to become something more. And isn't that the invitation to us as well? Through Peter, the life of God was blessed, broken open into the world. And here, this is interesting to me, Peter takes his nickname, a unique name given to him by Jesus, and he shares that name with everyone. There's not one rock here. There are many living stones, building a living sanctuary, a living outpost for mission. You are all living stones, he says. You are all invited to be that bridge that I had to learn through hard experience and the challenges of making mistakes to become part of. Now, in Peter's time, and this is what I got by reading the whole letter, the faithful had very little status, probably very little to offer others materially, although much to offer them spiritually in their hearts. But they had very little in the world. And they, I believe, were strengthened to think we're part of something significant that others may not see, but we sense its power, its presence. But today we may need to listen differently. We who have much, we have status, we have material goods, we have wealth of all kinds. And here this image resizes us, refocuses our hearts, reminds us what's important, reminds us what it is that bubbles up inside of us to offer, and that is a life not built on permanence and rules but built on the very life of God, somehow mysteriously inside of us. I've been reading a book about dementia from a Christian perspective written by a man named John Swinton. And one of the deep questions he wrestles with is, are we still fully human when we have lost some or all of our memory? And yet he reminds us, and this is what really struck me about his book, that it's how you understand yourself to be human that matters. And he says one of our essential faith categories for understanding our lives is that we are vulnerable. We are contingent, resting on God's love, holding ourselves open to grace. He says we would no more question whether a baby is human, even if their powers are very limited, than we might question an elder whose powers are waning and whose memory is going or even gone. Are they not still contingent, resting on God? The title of this sermon refers to the great church leader Benedict of Nursia. Benedict lived just about 1,500 years ago. There are many monastic orders. The Benedictine is still a vibrant order, a millennia and a half later. And one of the vows he asked his monks to take was to adopt the vow of stability. They were to commit to a community in a particular place for life, allowing that community to be a place where their own rough edges were worked on. Kathleen Norris, a contemporary writer, has been observing a Benedictine community in the Midwest, and she says this: stability is a matter of the heart, worked on by being close to one another in a single community. The members of the community are to be living stones, we might say, imparting the life they have to one another and to the world. Stability. Well, Peter struggled to be right-sized, to be available to his community and the world, to be available to what God was doing that was new and fresh and life-giving. Here are several marks of being right-sized, as Peter learned to be. Let's return to that poetry in the passage here. Chosen, chosen, chosen. Nothing to something. You know, when we present our work, we take pride in our responsibility, but we don't feed the ego, the hungry self. We remember that our work flows out of the love of God. So, pardon the homeliest of illustrations and forgive the comparison. We have a 35-pound Aussie mix at home named Bodhi. And when we're preparing dinner, he settles down on the mat by the sink and rests his puzzle on his paws, his muzzle on his paws. He's like that little boy, you might imagine, who stands and stares at his shoelaces and hopes for something he's not sure he can ask for. But he's quiet because he knows that eventually something good will happen. And this is security. This is the thing that we come back to through our spiritual practices, through the way we handle each other, through the respect we offer each other. It's the security of the image of God, alive among us, so it can settle deep in our hearts, deep in our work on a day like today when we celebrate that work that we share together. And this image of being chosen by God breathes such power into our hearts. You are enough, and there is enough love to go around. Another fragment. Welcome in the place of honor, vibrant. And there's so many ways to speak to this welcome. It's a deep part of our our congregational heritage and our current UCC identity. It's welcome. Even as we talked about that powerful message in the book of Ruth this year in small groups, the outsider who acted into a powerful welcome from God. So on an annual meeting day when the workings of the church are revealed, we again remember that everyone is reflected in the work of the church, no matter how recently they have come to sit at the table. Honor is not something earned, it's something given. It is the gift of this table, the gift of Jesus' life, the gift of this community. And one last stroke of Peter's painting here. A taste at the breast of God, drink deep. We have a first grandbaby, about a month old, and I have two images of him I look at quite often. In one, he's dressed in a Celtics onesie. I've been watching the Celtics with Brian, his father. He's looking out at the camera with this kind of appraising eye. Always makes me think, if he's asking, are you really a fan? I am. But the other is a picture of his sleeping face, the very image of trust. And that image is a deep biblical theme drawn up to us from time to time. It suggests that we cultivate stability in our lives, sometimes by resting, not just by working, sometimes by contemplating, and not just by speaking, sometimes by smiling and opening our hearts again to God. Now, Psalm 131 takes my image of little Arthur one important step farther. Listen to the words of Psalm 131. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. This could describe a right-sized Peter. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. Peter, right-sized, resting comfortably in his own gifts, abilities, and strengths, sharing his nickname, generous in spirit, settled in God, and ready for life and for action. Stability. Amen.